Well, good evening, everybody. I I hope I've configured the microphone properly again. um, I'm just going to give it just a minute here to collect my thoughts and to allow stragglers to make their way into the room, and then we'll get started in just a minute. So, just move something here. Okay. Mic sound good? Everything sound good? Mic check. All good. Okay, I've got my notes here. All right. So we've got people from Austin, Texas, from Minnesota, from Wales, Ireland, Arkansas, California, and Chepstow, Ontario. Fantastic. Very good. All right. Why don't we start with a prayer? In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena Dominus tecum. Benedicta tu in mulieribus et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. Our Lady of Victory, pray for us. In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. All right, very good. Oh, excuse me, I've got allergies. All right. So today, I've got all kinds of stuff for you guys. I think you're gonna be a little bit of fun. So for the last month or so, give or take, I've been getting these bizarre postcards from all over, like all over. The first ones came from Thailand, indicating that somehow, some way, a long lost alleged love child of mine in Thailand had just found me and was writing to me to let me know that he and mama were okay, and can I please come back to Thailand? I've never been to Thailand. I don't know where those postcards are. I must have stuck them somewhere and didn't really pay attention. And then I get cards from, where is this? From Armenia. So this one's from Armenia, and it says, "Hello, Papa, Mama, and I visit Armenia. Very beautiful. Do you remember? Love, your son." So that's one. And then there was this other one. This came in this envelope. So you see that it's sent. I mean, I guess this is Armenia. It's from Armenia. You can see on the stamp that it says Armenia on it. And it's just weird. This one was also in that envelope. It was blank. So they sent me two postcards, I guess. I got this one from Pakistan. "Hello, Papa. Mom and I miss you very much. Please come back to Pakistan." And it's different handwriting, by the way. You compare the handwriting, it's totally different. I got this one from Mongolia. So apparently I have a long lost love child in Mongolia. This one's not even in English, so I can't even read that one. Totally different handwriting. I got this one today from Pakistan. It says, "Hello, Papa. Mom and I miss you very much. Please come back to Pakistan. Your son." So, I don't know who's behind this or what their game is, but it's bizarre. It's just absolutely bizarre why anybody would take the time to try and coordinate a series of postcards coming from all over the world implying that I had had some sort of extramarital affairs with some of the locals there. It's just really strange. I've never been to any of these countries, so I have no idea what anybody is hoping to accomplish here. But it's just weird. And yes, it's going to be a rather fun stamp and postcard collection. Maybe I should start a scrapbook. Anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you. It's that was kind of the start of my week. This week has been absolutely, I don't even know what to make of it. So I get these postcards earlier this week. Then my well pump dies. So I spent a day and a half trying to figure out how to get water in the house because the well pump went out. Then we finally got the well pump working, and then the website broke. And a lot of time this week working with trying to move the website to a new server, trying to ensure that the website is now activated on the, and make sure that the email system is working too, because we're trying desperately to make sure that the website is no longer identified by Spamhaus as spam. And so far, so good. Everything's clean. The website's clean. We're not having a problem anymore at this point. So we're trying really hard to make sure that we stay that way, that we're no longer identified as spam. But it took us 3 days. I spent 3 days working on this. So the well pump dies, then the website dies, then I'm scrambling to get that fixed. And then that night, my poor son, who just came back from school, goes to use the bathroom in the new bathroom downstairs in the basement, and he flushes the toilet, and the next thing you know, the flush, because it's a flush out coming out of a basement, the pump on that wasn't working, and everything backed up on him, and so it was, wow, it's been a week. And a lot of it seems centered around our defense of Father Escalante. Now I'm going to get into this in a little bit. I'll tell you a little bit about that. But it's just been a wild ride. Picture froze. That figures. If the picture freezes, there's a storm going on outside, and it sometimes interferes with our internet. So I apologize in advance if things don't go as well. Anyway, so let me tell you what we've been working on. So we fixed the website, we got everything going. The new URL is lepantoin.org, and I'm going to put that here in the chat box. So that's our new website URL, lepantoin.org. As I said, we moved everything because of the issues that we were having with Spamhaus identifying our website as spam, and it was blocking us all over the place. So that's fixed. Yesterday was a really good day. I met with my research team because we are going to be going to St. Louis at the end of the month from June 23rd to the 28th. We'll be in St. Louis investigating the Association of United States Catholic Priests, AUSCP, investigating their annual assembly. Just as I participated last year or investigated in them last year, we're going to be doing the same thing this year, going to just see what they're doing, see what they're up to, gather some materials, see what's going on. And, AUSCP is going to see me, and they're going to freak out, and they're going to ask me to leave. And I'm going to say, no, I'm here at the hotel. I'm a guest, so you can't kick me out. So it'll be interesting. I'll be reporting live from St. Louis, what we're finding, and the kinds of things that are going on. I'm also going to be participating in a rosary rally out there. And at this rosary rally, we're going to try and drive some media to it so that we can just let people know, hey, there's a heretical organization here. It's meeting right under, with the permission, obviously, of Archbishop Carlton, because he's participating in one of their masses. But we're here to pray for an end to the heresy that's being propagated by this organization. So I'm going to come up with some talking points, and it should be good. So we'll have a prayer or a rosary rally out there. I'll get pictures, I'll get media, hopefully, and I'll send those to you. And the other thing I'll be doing is giving a presentation. I'll be giving a talk there about the infiltrators into the Catholic Church. So it's kind of a segue into what we're going to talk about tonight. But I bring that up because yesterday I met with our research team about the AUSCP and the things that they're up to and the things that they're doing. And we got some really, really good talking points. I don't want to give the punchline away just yet. We do have some really good articles that are going to be coming out about the AUSCP. It's good fodder for you guys so that you can go to your priests and your bishops and say, hey, if you know of anybody who's affiliated with the AUSCP, or if any of the priests in our diocese are affiliated with the AUSCP, we need to not only expose them, but Your Excellency, you need to do something about forbidding them from having anything to do with this group. So that's going to be a big push. We're going to push that there at the end of the month. Let's see. The other meeting that I had was with another organization, and I don't want to let the cat out of the bag just yet because we're still in the investigation phase. But we did meet about our current ongoing work, and I think we have 26 pages of outline already ready to go. We've got thousands of pages of documentation that we've collected on this so far, and it looks like our report on this is going to be about a month long, or I'm sorry, not a month, about 200 pages long, if not more. And it's going to take us a couple of months at least to finish gathering the information. And it got to be such a big project that we had to bring another organization in. So we are now collaborating with another organization it's bigger than ours, but they have reach that we don't. So we're working with them to try and gather some new information and see if we can't crack this thing wide open. But I mean, just the information that we have now is alone to damn CRS, but we want to make sure that we cut off any excuses they can possibly make. And that means we need additional resources. We need additional investigations that we just don't have the ability to get. So that meeting took place yesterday. It was a fantastic meeting. It went really well. Our two organizations are gelling very well. We're really excited about what we're going to be able to produce at this point. Let me see. And the last thing I want to tell you about, I spent, in between all of the disasters that were going on, I spent a ton of time working on this case in the Diocese of Arlington, where a priest named Father Ronald Escalante was accused of a boundary violation and removed from his parish. I told you about this about 3 weeks ago. We got video of some of the parishioners who were telling their story and what they knew and understood of the case. And then I got documentation from one of the people that contacted the diocese. They called and wrote to the diocese saying that they had direct information on the person who was making the accusation against Father Escalante. Direct information is this. The accuser is a young girl, a teenage girl, who after school one day was in the locker room and she was crying. And her friends came in and they said, "What's going on? What's happening?" And she explained to them that her mother was forcing her to lie about these allegations against the priest. And she said, these allegations are not true, but I'm being forced by my mother to make these lies. And then she was afraid for what was going to happen to her family if this information got out. And she was afraid about, afraid of a lot of things. What was her mother going to do if that she had made these false allegations. So we got that letter. And the reason that we published the letter, that the family that wrote to the diocese with that information, they tried calling. They called, I think it was 5 days in a row. 5 days in a row they called and got no response from the diocese. Got no cooperation or help from the diocese as to the best course of action. So they finally wrote a letter. They sent this letter to the diocese, and the diocese never responded. They then went to a publication in Virginia called the Blue Ridge Leader, and they interviewed with the Blue Ridge Leader under condition of anonymity. They didn't want their name out there. So the Blue Ridge Leader published that story. They contacted the diocese. They said, look, we have somebody coming forward to us saying that there is evidence that this girl who made these allegations against Father Escalante is lying. Do you know anything about this? And the communications person said, oh my goodness, let me ask around and I'll get back to you. Well, she didn't get back to her. The next day she called and got no answer. So 2 days after making the initial phone call, the Blue Ridge Leader, without getting any response from the diocese, decided to publish. And then the diocese turned back around and started attacking the Blue Ridge Leader as unprofessional. So the question is, why didn't the investigator follow up with the Blue Ridge Leader? Because the Blue Ridge Leader said, I spoke with witnesses. They are telling me this and this and this. I went to the diocese first. The diocese didn't bother to give me a statement. So I went ahead and published. But no investigation goes to the diocese and says, so who are these witnesses? Can we talk to them? Can we arrange a meeting? Can the bishop talk to them? Nothing. Just an article that comes out and attacks the Blue Ridge Leader as being unprofessional. So I wrote an article, and that's the article I put in there, kind of detailing all of this, saying, look, this is everything that's happened so far. And these people at the parish feel like they're being stonewalled. They're not getting anywhere. Hey, Therese, good to see you. So the end of it is that this morning, after publishing my article 2 days ago, this morning because I did get a response from the diocese when I said, look, I have these letters. Does the diocese have any statement on, and I gave them a list of questions. I published their statement in full. I gave my observations about the statement and said, look, I think that there's a discrepancy here. I think there's a discrepancy there, but by and large, this is the statement. So the diocese wrote me this morning, and the communications chief, or the chief communications officer, a guy named Billy Atwell, he wrote me and in a very backhanded way asked some questions and said, okay, well, what about this and what about this? Here's the thing. The diocese is denying that they ever received the letter. They're saying, we didn't get the letter. And I said, okay, well, what about the phone calls? The diocese says, well, Angela Pellerano, who was the communications point of contact, the one that these parents said that they called and spoke to, she apparently had knee surgery at one point. They're saying she underwent major operation from a skiing injury on April 1st. And they said that she wasn't working. Well, the person who wrote the letter said that they spoke with Angela. Now, where would they get that name? Why would they just make that up? Either they spoke with Angela or not. So he says, oh yeah, well, she had surgery. So I don't know who she talked to, but well, look, the thing is, I've been out on leave for illness or, injury. In fact, I was out on injury when I worked at American Life League. I was on my back for a week, but I still had my phone with me and I still was accepting phone calls. So just because she's out of the office doesn't mean she didn't receive the call. His statement doesn't say she didn't receive the call. It just says she was out of the office. So I think that they're playing games here, and saying this office doesn't have any or any messages that they have recorded that indicate that they called. Now, here's the thing. Regardless of what the diocese wants to say about this and whatever games this guy wants to play, I actually went to the individual who placed these phone calls and I said, can we have your phone records? And they're pulling them. And once I have those phone records and I send them back to the communications director and I said, here are the records. Phone call made on April 2nd, phone call made on April 3rd, April 4th, April 5th. And it will have time of day. It'll also have length of call. And when I give that to the diocese isn't going to be able to say, well, nobody called us. They're going to have to change their tack and say, I don't recall that conversation. I don't remember that. And, it all becomes a memory game and everything goes down the memory hole. I'm not going to say that they're lying because a lot of things happen throughout the course of the day. Not everybody remembers everything that happens or every conversation they have. Things slip through the cracks. I get that. What I don't get is that the diocese is so willing to knuckle down and attack somebody who says, I have information on this particular matter, while they swallow hook, line, and sinker everything that the accuser is saying. Why would you swallow everything on one side and then stonewall the other? It makes no sense. And the other question that I asked the communications director was this, because one of the things that he said to me was that, let me pull it up. He said, because we talked about the diocese, whether the diocese received the letter or not. And he said, diocese never received the letter. And then he goes on to say that just because you say you sent the letter, meaning the people that sent it, doesn't mean that it was ever actually received or delivered. But then he addresses something else in my article, which is the idea that Father Escalante never received the letter that the bishop sent saying these are the additional allegations before the bishop published that, told the public that there are additional allegations. And I asked specifically about that in my initial article, and they just said, we sent the legal Father Escalante's legal representation a letter indicating that there were additional allegations. The legal team denies vehemently that they ever received this information. So here's what I said. I said, let me pull it up real quick. I said, regarding another matter of communication pertaining to the investigation, I'm curious. Oh, no, that's not that one. It was, here we go. Concerning the letter sent to the diocese, you indicated that the diocese never received the letter. You said, having a copy of a letter does not prove that it was actually delivered or received by the diocese. It cannot be alleged that the diocese's statement is a contradiction of current evidence when the evidence itself is inconclusive. But with regard to the letter sent to Father Escalante, you wrote, quote, the truth is that Father Escalante received the letter through his canonical advocate before the bishop's letter was published at a parish. So Father may have learned about the other allegations through the letter. He received that prior to it being published publicly. This guy's communication skills are not very good. His sentence structure is kind of off. I said, if you have a certified mail receipt or a written receipt, responsive receipt, then you would be in possession of proof of delivery and reception. If not, you're not affording Father Escalante the same possibility being claimed by the diocese, that the letter was not received. But this begs another set of questions. Exactly when was the letter sent to Father Escalante, and when was it allegedly received? Was it his canonical representative provided enough time to share the information with Father Escalante before the letter was published? Did the diocese verify that Father Escalante's canonical representative had actually? We'll see if the diocese responds to those. So this is not a closed matter. We're going to continue to pursue this. There are a couple of other matters that are being investigated at this point in time, so we'll see what happens. I'll let you know. So let's get to tonight's topic. It's taken me a while to get there. I'm sorry, but I want to make sure that I keep you up to date to know what we're working on and how things are going, so that you know that I'm not just wasting time here. Here is the topic for tonight: the Revolutionary Network. Now, we've spoken about the AUSCP. I told you about them last year when I was conducting these investigations. Those of you that have followed the Lepanto Institute have seen the kinds of things that I've been digging up. So you're well aware, you're at least familiar with the Association of United States Catholic Priests and what they're up to, and just how fully heretical and rotten they really are. Pushing for women deacons, pushing for homosexual priests, pushing for married priests, pushing for something called priestless parishes. That's what this is all about. They're very close with New Ways Ministry, which is a condemned homosexual group. They're very close with Dignity USA, another condemned homosexual group. They're very close with the Catholic Climate Covenant, which is all about environmentalist nonsense. They're very close with Few Church, which is a heretical group based in Europe. And they're also very close with Voice of the Faithful, which is supposed to be a survivors network for victims of priestly clerical abuse, but it's mostly using that as a vehicle to push their other heretical agendas that I just mentioned. So AUSCP is very bad. And I've talked about them quite a bit. So they're part of this revolutionary network. I've also talked about communist infiltrators into the Vatican. We've talked about, like, I think it was last week, we were talking about Cardinal McCarrick and the communist infiltration that he may have represented when he went to St. Gallen, and the communist training that he would have received there. I've also spoken at great length about the Campaign for Human Development and Catholic Relief Services. So you guys are well aware and well up to speed on those. But there are other aspects of this network that really needs to be addressed. The infiltration of the church has taken place on many, many fronts. We know about the homosexualization of the seminaries. We know about the socialization of the gospel. And this has led to a very perverse and twisted approach to the liturgy of the church. When you change the focus of the church away from God and more, what are they trying to accomplish? The whole movement ultimately and totally is about the denial of hell and the elevation of man. It's about, well, it's really about the discussion that I participated in at the Rome Life Forum just a couple of weeks ago in Rome, the title of which was The Civilization of Man versus the Civilization of God. So you have this dichotomy. What is the kingdom of God, and how does it measure up against the civilization of man? It really is that struggle. That's the fight that is taking place. Those are the two warring factions. And it's all predicated on this element of the denial of hell. The kingdom of man, the civilization of man, denies the reality of hell. Otherwise, people would have to act accordingly. If hell exists and we are going to be judged for our actions, and there is an everlasting punishment that we would find if we were to live according to the ways of perdition, then if you don't want to go to hell, you have to act. So the civilization of man really is all about the denial of hell. It's about the denial of the permanence of hell. It's about the denial of the existence of hell. It's a denial of the punishments of hell. So all elements of it go towards some denial of hell. When the liturgy was changed, in 1970. It went from a God-centered liturgy, and I'm going to state this very matter-of-factly and objectively. I'm not trying to say that everybody who goes to a Novus Ordo Mass is a part of the kingdom of man. Blah, blah. I'm not saying that. But I'm telling you, objectively speaking, that the differences between the Novus Ordo and the traditional Latin Mass are vast. And the focus is completely different. And that's what I want to focus on. That's what I want to talk about. Because the Novus Ordo Mass, one of the very first things they did is they changed from ad orientem, which is saying Mass facing with the congregation toward the altar and the high altar and the tabernacle, or versus populorum, which is the Mass facing the people. Just on the face of it, objectively speaking, you have a Mass that went from everyone focused on God to the priest shifting his attention back to man. So man is giving his attention to the priest, and the priest is rendering his attention back to man. Okay, and then it becomes an echo chamber. Statement, response, statement, response. So then you have this idea of participation in the Mass. Everybody is participating. We're all the congregants are centered on their participation, and they're reading their roles, and we serve a part. That's why you see so many people now holding hands during the Our Father. This is why you see people taking the orans position during the Our Father. You have the congregation participating in the Mass, so it becomes a Mass of all of us, as opposed to a Mass celebrated by a priest, observed or witnessed by the congregation. You see the difference? So the Mass where the priest is he's the celebrant. You have to understand, any Mass that is said is a valid Mass as long as there is a priest, the proper accoutrements that go, the bread, the wine, and all that, and one witness. It has to be one witness. Or if it's a private Mass that a priest says in his own private chapel altar, that's also valid. But generally, you have to have a witness. You take that, the Mass is valid. If you take away the priest, no Mass. There's no Mass. But this idea of congregation participation makes it seem as though the congregation plays as much a role in the Mass as the priest does, which is why we now have such a push for priestless parishes and celebrations of the Eucharist without the Mass. Because it's just the same. You're still receiving the Eucharist, right? I mean, sure, the priest has to be the one to confect the Eucharist and to consecrate and everything else, but that's not necessary, because the congregation can have a prayer meeting and then reception of Holy Communion given by a deacon, or even just a member of the lay council. That's the difference in focus: man-centered versus Christ-centered. You have this idea of songs versus chant. This idea of songs where people they feel good, they get all jazzed up. Sometimes you get the guitars going and the strings, or sometimes just piano, but it's all songs. It's song oriented rather than chant. Songs are all about the emotions. It's about the heart. It's about making you feel good. Chant is all about elevating the mind and soul towards God. So you have a dichotomy there. You have Mass said in the vernacular rather than in the language of the church. So prior to the Novus Ordo, you had the Mass being said in Latin. So Latin is the official language of the church. All the documents are written in Latin. All of the constitutions are written in Latin. All of the laws are written in Latin. The Mass had been written in Latin. You could go from here to Mongolia to Timbuktu to the southern tip of Africa to the furthest reaches of well, I don't know, the southern point of Chile. And it wouldn't matter where you went, you would understand and be able to follow the Mass wherever you were. But now with the Mass in the vernacular, it's all man centered. It's all about what I can understand in my own language. And what does this lead to? It leads to a constant monkeying with translations, where suddenly you say, well, this translation isn't good, so we need to change it, which actually changes the meaning somewhat from two other languages. So what was understood in one language is now understood in another language in a completely different sense. And you wind up with this constant churning of the translations and the monkeying with language in the Mass. So Mass of the people or language of the people versus language of the church. Again, city of God versus city of man. You also have communion while standing and in the hands, where people are communicating to themselves. The opposite of that is receiving on the knees and on the tongue. So this versus this. In this action, I'm feeding myself. This says, I can do it. I have the authority, the power, and the ability to hold Christ in my own hands. In this action, where you're on your knees and you're receiving on the tongue, you have no power within yourself. You must receive from God. And the priest represents God. He is in persona Christi. So again, you have this at least external appearance of something that is man-centered to something that is Christ-centered. Okay? Big difference. So this is why the revolutionaries in the 1960s were so intent on changing the rubrics of the Mass and changing the formation of the Mass. They started monkeying with how they wanted to get things 1950s, 1940s, it depends on where you were. But they were already experimenting with different ways of saying the Mass, and they were doing this illicitly. This was illegal. They should not have been doing this, but they were doing it because they're revolutionaries. If you're doing something illegal because you're hoping to change something a little bit later down the line, you're a revolutionary. You're not acting in conformity with the church. So these radical revolutionaries who infiltrated the church, they were the ones who grabbed a hold of key, the liturgical, as much as it was a part of the external action of the church. So this liturgical change, and why was it necessary? Why was it necessary to change the liturgy? Well, because if you change the liturgy from something that is God-centered, something that is Christ-centered, you can then change the hearts and minds of the people to be something more man-centered as opposed to God-centered. So action follows thought, right? First in thought, then in action. The same thing happens in the prayer life. Lex orandi, lex credendi. Okay, as you pray, so you'll act, or so you will believe. Okay? If you or as you pray, so you'll believe. If your prayers, and I don't mean you, I mean the general cosmic you, if your prayers are now in action in the Mass, all man-oriented, well, then your beliefs are going to become man-oriented, which means in turn, your life is going to be more man-oriented. It was necessary to do this in order to open the way for a social action. You had to have a man-centered faith that leads to man-centered action. And so this man-centered action, this new prayer life or new prayer way of praying leads to a social action, social participation, social justice. Okay, and then all of those things become more important than prayer, moral living, contemplation, and adoration. Um, so all of this oops, I didn't mean to do that. All of this social action, the gospel of social justice, is what came out of this, because the preaching that came out of the revolution in the mass was all about trying to make people all social. We have to we have to get along, and we have to fight for equality, and we have to fight for economic rights and all this stuff. Okay, the gospel of social justice means more focus and attention being put on government policies, making sure that everyone has their rights, and working for economic equality. And that's where you get the USCCB. The USCCB had no power and authority or even anything to do prior to this. And now it seems as if this is all the church does. This is all we do. We sit around, we try to look for different ways to get the government involved in our lives so that we can have social and economic equality. And so everybody can have their rights. Do you realize that the church never speaks of rights? She speaks of duties, but she doesn't speak of rights. Life, nothing in life is guaranteed except suffering and death. We see that in the explanation that or the example that we're given of Dismas and Gestas. Both of them are suffering equally. Only one of them was saved. Why? Because he embraced his suffering and he turned his attention and focus and adoration to God. Gestas, who was also suffering, cursed, blasphemed, and refused belief in Christ. Okay? That's the difference. Center of God, center of man. That's the fight. If I spent my life going around saying the world owes me a living, just like the grasshopper in the grasshopper and the ants, oh, the world owes me a living. If that's the attitude that I had, I would die and go to hell, because I would have no desire to see how my life should be oriented toward God and assisting others to orient their lives toward God. Life is all about an orientation, not a sexual orientation, but a Christocentric orientation. Are we focused on Christ or not? If you're not, you're going to hell. It's that simple. If your life is focused on Christ, well, you've got a chance. You've got a shot. You could lose it, but you've got a shot. But if your life is not focused on Christ and you're looking for what you can get out of life, you're done. Game over. So this man-centered action and man-centered gospel leads to the ultimate conclusion, which is a man-centered civilization. So religion becomes a vehicle for pushing civilization, the growth, the development, the explosion of technology and comforts and equality and everything that goes along with that. Now everything is all about trying to make sure that we are building civilization and working towards the next greatest thing, whatever that is. Whether it's walking on the moon, going to Mars, conducting interstellar travel, time travel, whatever. It's all science fiction nonsense, but it's the idea and the focus on civilization of man. We are building ourselves. Well, at some point you're going to die. I'm going to die. I'll never see whatever starships get to the next galaxy. So why would I focus and spend my life focusing on trying to build something I'll never accomplish or see? And when I die, what next? So it's all about what you're focused on. The only way to ensure this, which is a civilization built on technology, comforts, equality, and all that. The only way to ensure this is to make sure that everyone is free to act as they wish. So this is where the sexual revolution comes from. We have to have sexual freedoms, and it's got to be enshrined as a right. All manner of self-determination has to be protected. So that means I have to have the ability to determine when I'm going to live and when I'm going to die. I have to be able to determine whether I'm a man or a woman, or whether I'm an animal or a piece of machinery. Okay? All manner of self-determination is now the ultimate enshrined right. Why? Because we've elevated man over God. It is the necessary conclusion to be drawn from this. And since there is no hell to worry about, then there has to be an alternate system of morality. If I don't have to worry about hell when I die, well, and the only thing that I have to worry about are natural consequences. So, with a death of the Christian morality, we have to elevate a social morality. You have social sins that lead to temporal punishments, such as environmentalism. Okay, you have these philosophies: environmentalism, capitalism, death penalty, immigration, racism, homophobia. All of these things enshrine the basic inherent rights of man. Keep in mind, in 1947, you had the International Declaration of the Human Rights of Man, which was built on the French Revolutionary doctrine of the rights of man. All of this is predicated on building up a civilization and making sure everybody has their rights. But there's no sense of God's rights and our duties toward God. So necessarily, these two ideas, these two conflicting sides are at war. They are fighting each other. So who's on our side? Well, the pro-life movement, by and large, is on our side. The pro-family movement. But ultimately, any priest who is working towards trying to lead us to Christ and to move us away from a life of sin, those are the soldiers that we should be following. Those are the soldiers we need. And the question is, why don't we have any bishops who are doing this? They're so cowardly. A few will come out. I mean, we had Bishop Tobin come out with a statement saying, no Christian, nobody in my diocese should be participating in these LGBT pride parades. And then he got blasted for it. He was blasted for it so badly, he backtracked. And I don't want to call him spineless, because it took courage to come forward and say what he did. But where's the sense of conviction? Where is the sense that, the day of the beginning of the 13th chapter of Revelation? I'm just going to read this portion to you. It's verse 1 through 4. It says, I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his heads 10 diadems, and upon his heads names of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. Now keep in mind, all of this is allegory. It's not a literal thing. We're not going to see a giant creature come out of the ocean like. And the dragon gave him his own strength and great power. And I saw one of the heads, as it were, slain to death. The death's wounds was healed, and all the earth was in admiration after the beast. And here's the point that I wanted to make clear to you. And they adored the beast, which gave great power, or they adored the dragon, which gave great power to the beast. And they adored the beast, saying, quote, who is like the beast, and who shall be able to fight with him? I give you that quote because I'm reminded of the concerns that people bring to my attention, and they say, how can we possibly fight this? How can we possibly fight this infiltration that's gotten into the church? Incidentally, speaking of infiltration, if you've not read Taylor Marshall's book, get it. Get it. It is a fantastic read. It's a quick read too. It's not It's not really that long. It's about 200, it's a little over 200 pages. And it's not hard to read. It's easy to follow, well footnoted, well documented, get it. Okay, but people ask me, all these problems with Catholic Relief Services and the Campaign for Human Development, and the communists in the Vatican and everything else, how can we possibly fight this? It's too big. Well, the answer is we can't. We can't. It is too big. I can't slay this beast. I can't go up to the USCCB and say, you're done. You need to be shut down. They're going to laugh at me. Makes no difference. You could even, I'm not advocating this. This is not something I'm telling anybody to do. But if somebody were to burn down the USCCB building, it would do no good. It would do no good. It wouldn't stop the people who were involved. It wouldn't stop the campaigns that are taking place in the name of the church and these bishops. It wouldn't do anything. It would cost some money, but that's it. All right. So there's nothing an individual or even a group of us can do to fight this beast. But the one who's going to fight this beast is right up there. Okay. That's who will fight the beast. I remember the story of Bernadette Soubirous when she went to Lourdes and she was visiting Our Lady over the course of a fortnight. And while she was there, one day the Gave River started overflowing. And there were these horrible sounds, these beasts that were crawling around and making horrible noises. And they kept telling Bernadette, get out, get out. And Bernadette continued to pray her rosary, but she noticed that Our Lady standing there, who was praying the rosary with her on the Our Father beads, turned and glanced toward the Gave River. And as soon as she glanced, the river went back to its normal size and the demons fled. We have to do what we can in order to inform people. And we have to do what we can in order to keep people motivated so that they can persevere through the struggle that is being brought by the beast. But we can't fight it. It's not for us to fight. It's not for us to defeat. It's Our Lady's to defeat. And it's up to us to give our focus and attention and prayers and supplications to her, so that she, together with our Lord, will bury her head in the back of the neck of that serpent, so that we can finally be rid of the crisis that is going on in the church today. That's the whole point of all of this. Want us to, because when we in our, God will hear our prayers. And the beast does not want us giving our Lord our prayers. He doesn't want us giving those supplications because it will shorten his time. So, if you want to fight the revolutionaries, you have to fight it with the only weapon available, and that's the rosary. Our Lady gave us the rosary so that we could fight the beast through her. You want to get rid of the schoolyard bullies? Go to your mom. That's how we do it. In any event, it is First Friday. Excuse me. I have had, like I said, I've had allergies all week. So pardon me. But it's First Friday, so I'm going to get going to Mass. So we'll just go ahead and close with a prayer here. And if you have any questions or anything you'd like to follow up with me on after this, just give me a shout. Go ahead and send me an email to my new email address. Let me give it to you. My new email address is michael@lepantoin.net. Okay, so it's not going to let me do that. I'm just going to put at. Well, okay, why don't I do this? I'll break it up. It's not letting me post for whatever reason. I don't know what's going on. I don't know. Michael? Nope. Won't let me post. So I'm sorry for that. But in any event, it's Michael at lepantoin.net. So in any event, let's go ahead and close with a prayer. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena Dominus tecum. Benedicta tu in mulieribus et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. Our Lady of Victory, pray for us. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.